Okay, welcome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining your Tuesday evening. Is it Tuesday? Yes, it's Tuesday. Tuesday evening with She Matters. My name is Marguerite Pierce, and I'm one of the co-founders and COO of She Matters. I think it's really important that we start this evening by acknowledging the emotional labor that's involved in this work and the weight of discussing reproductive rights and Black maternal health in our country. We hold reverence for those impacted by the Black maternal health crisis. Oh, sorry, I'm letting people in at the same time, double duty. Um, Honoring their stories and experiences with care. While tonight's discussion centers on Black women, it's essential that all voices, men, women, Black and white, engage in this conversation. So if you have a colleague that does not look like you but works in this space, forward the link, text them the link. This conversation is for everyone and not just us. Um, Thank you for sharing your evening with us. Lastly, just so we're clear, this event tonight does not endorse a specific candidate. Instead, it's a space dedicated to supporting reproductive rights, advocating for quality maternal health care for everyone, and uplifting women. With that, I will pass it over to my co-founder and my best friend, Jade Kearney, for official welcoming comments. Jade.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for being here. Can you all hear me? Technology does its thing. Thank you, Marguerite. And again, she did say we're not endorsing anyone, but I will say, let's get to the polls on next Tuesday, right? And vote for reproductive rights. Um, Hello and welcome to our virtual event. My name is Jade Kearney. I am the CEO and co-founder of She Matters. At She Matters, our mission is clear. We're here to decrease Black maternal mortality through education and technology. I started this organization with Marguerite almost 5 years ago, Marge, after my own battle with postpartum comorbidities. I experienced postpartum anxiety, OCD, and numerous physical challenges, all of which were exacerbated by my mental illness. As I fought hard to heal, one truth became evident. I was suffering in silence. I was part of a neglected group, neglected demographic, and my story mirrored the experience of countless other women. That realization gave me purpose. I knew I was meant to advocate for equitable maternal care, especially postpartum care, because it was after going home that my suffering truly began. In the hospital, I was so excited to have this baby and to have made it through the birthing experience that I didn't think of what's going to happen when I got home. At She Matters, Black maternal health isn't just a focus, it's our mission every single day. However, today, we must also recognize the profound impact the 2024 elections will have on reproductive rights. The stakes are higher than ever. In this event, we aim to equip you with three key things: valuable information, deeper insight, and shared experiences. Together, let's strengthen our voice, uplift our community, and ensure that every mother receives the care and dignity she deserves. So again, thank you for being here. I hope you guys enjoy our speakers and folks here to educate us all on what's at stake.
Wonderful. So I just before we get into the panel discussion, I wanted to take a moment to introduce our panelists. And once we get going, I'll pin all the panelists so that everyone can see um, the people that are speaking. So first up, I want to acknowledge Monica Edwards. She uses she, her pronouns, and she is a reproductive justice policy advocate and writer. She currently works as the senior manager of public policy at the Power to Decide, a 501c3 nonprofit that's dedicated to ensuring everyone has the power to decide if, when, and under what circumstances to get pregnant and have a child. Monica served as an if, when, how lawyering for reproductive justice, federal reproductive justice fellow, and federal policy manager at URGE, Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity. There, she focused on federal policy priorities, such as working on drafting and the introduction of the Women's Health Protection Act, the Abortion Justice Act, and Real Education and Access for a Healthy Youth Act, and also worked to translate federal policy asks and priorities to young people aged 18 to 30 in the South and Midwest. Her experience also includes time at In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda, where she worked on the 2023 Black Reproductive Justice Agenda. Monica also serves on the boards of the Yellowhammer Fund and West Alabama Women's Clinic. She was born and raised in Alabama, and Monica received her Bachelor of Arts and Juris Doctor from the University of Alabama and the University of Alabama School of Law. So welcome, Monica. So glad to have you here with us. We are also going to be joined by two moms in our community that are here to share their birthing and postpartum experiences. We have Dr. Candace McLean out of New York and Mimi Taylor out of Virginia Beach, Virginia. So with that, Monica, I will throw the first question to you. I'm going to pin you first if I can figure out how to do that. Here we go. So let's kick it off with the elephant in the room, the Dobbs decision, right? It's affected reproductive care very broadly. Can you discuss how the restrictive policies are impacting areas like fertility treatment, miscarriage management, and Black maternal health specifically?
Sure, of course. And just making sure everyone can hear me, because technology be technology sometimes. So thanks for having me, and good to be in this space with y'all. And yeah, just to start, just to recap, we all know in June 2022, the Supreme Court gutted nearly 50 years of legal precedent in the Dobbs decision. And the result of that has been a patchwork of abortion access in the states. And it has left millions with limited access to abortion or no access at all. Since the decision in Dobbs, at least 14 states have now made abortion illegal, leaving millions of people without access to abortion care. And we know these impacts don't fall equally. In fact, a recent report by the National Partnership for Women and Families found that of the 26 combined states where abortion is banned or likely to be banned, over half of women of reproductive age, millions of women with disabilities, and millions of women of color specifically are in these states where abortion is banned or likely to be banned. And we also know, to get at the other part of that question, is that the ripple effect that is of Dobbs is not just about abortion, and abortion is not what has just been impacted, and it's not what will continue to just be impacted. For example, recent research shows that access to contraceptive care has decreased and worsened in the Dobbs area. And then additionally, many of the states where abortion is severely restricted or banned completely are some of the same states with the worst maternal mortality rates in the country. For example, Mississippi, my home state of Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, etc. And if you couple that already unacceptable statistic with the current Dobbs era, where many providers are now leaving banned states entirely because they can't provide the full range of obstetric care, these states that already have dire maternal mortality rates are now facing a shortage of providers, leaving them as being maternal care deserts, which means that they are areas with few or absolutely no obstetric care or resources. And that means people either have to travel to get that care or they can't get that care at all. And then lastly, to touch upon fertility, I'm sure we all remember earlier this year, again, Alabama, our Supreme Court earlier decision where we ruled that frozen embryos were considered children under the state's wrongful death of a minor act. And immediately the fallout from that was that many of the fertility clinics across the state of Alabama ceased to provide care out of fear of if or how they could operate, and if they did operate, whether they would have to face criminalization. And so I think, just to kind of wrap it all up, I think the Dobbs impact has been very clear in that it's not just about abortion, it's about the full range of sexual and reproductive health care. And the same people that have been targeting abortion and that will continue targeting abortion are also the people that have this playbook of coming after all forms of sexual and reproductive health care. That includes fertility, contraception, and what have you.
Thank you so much. Jade, I think you had some comments to add.
No, I didn't. I didn't come on.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, thank you for that. Yeah, we're just looking for our other participants. They haven't joined yet, but I'm hoping that they'll join soon. So Monica, I'll keep the questions coming to you if that's okay. Okay,
Sorry.
so so one of my recently I met a woman that is in maternal fetal medicine, and she's practicing down there in Texas. And she shared with me that she's prohibited from using certain words and certain language when communicating with her patients. And so this question is based off of her experience, right? How do language restrictions and limitations on discussing abortion affect healthcare providers' ability to communicate options to their patients?
Yeah, of course. Even before Dobbs and the fall of Roe, we've already seen, all of us have seen the increasing attempts to restrict and ultimately ban abortion. And not only just ban abortion care, but also kind of restrict the ways in which providers are able to provide sexual and reproductive health care. And so even before the fall of Roe, there were states that required certain types of counseling. And so we know that every state requires that when seeking care, a patient has consent before undergoing any type of medical treatment, and that consent be informed, meaning that they have the full information that they need to make decisions about the type of care they're going to get, what that looks like, plans post-care, etc. However, when it comes to abortion and abortion counseling requirements, sometimes it actually runs afoul of these principles of informed consent. And what it looks like is, for example, 5 of the 8 states that even before Dobbs had restrictions on how providers talked about abortion care, whether they could refer people to abortion care or just sexual and reproductive health care in general. For example, 5 of the 8 states included information that falsely talked about breast cancer as a link between abortion. So basically saying that, right, like, okay, you could go have this abortion, but like there's a risk of breast cancer. Despite the fact that that information is just false and you're straight up lying to people, it compromises a patient's ability to make informed decisions about their care, right? If you go seeking information about a procedure, whether that be abortion, whether that be about birth control, whether that be about fertility, what have you, if you don't have accurate information and providers are not giving you accurate information so that you can sit down and make an informed decision about your care, right? That's compromising your care. At that point, you're not receiving the full range of care, and you're not, you don't have the informed consent that you're supposed to have and that you need in order to make those decisions. And so even before Roe, even before the fall of Roe, we've seen states who have these types of requirements regarding counseling about abortion. During the previous administration, under the Trump administration, if people are familiar with the Title X family planning program, it's the only federal program dedicated to family planning. And so when you think about, for example, the clinics that you may go to if you are a person with low income, most of the times, a lot of those clinics are Title X clinics, and they're receiving Title X funds. That's how they're able to provide low cost or no cost sexual and reproductive health care in your community, right? And under the Trump administration, there was this attempt to put what we call the gag rule on Title X clinics, essentially saying that if you're going to be a clinic and you're going to receive these federal funds, you cannot in any way, shape, or form refer someone to abortion, give them a pamphlet about abortion, right? And even though we know Title X clinics don't actually provide abortion, right? They specialize in other aspects of family care, right? If someone comes in and they do need that referral, but you're unable to give them that information because of policies and restrictions like the global gag rule, or if you're forced to give them inaccurate information, it really compromises the patient's and the person's ability to get the care that they need. And so I hope that answered the question.
No, you did. And I'm curious for the folks on the call, we can make this as interactive as we want it to be. But if there are any practicing physicians, specifically OBGYNs or the like, midwives as well, I'm curious to hear your comments based off of what Monica just shared, because that's putting you between, a rock and a hard place to try to practice in states with these restrictions. If anyone's willing to share. Did someone raise their hand?
Dara
Okay.
King.
Oh, yeah, Dara, you have the floor. Hi, Dara.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for this informative meeting. I'm an OBGYN. I've been practicing for over 20 years. I am in Maryland, so I'm using air quotes that I'm in a safe state, safer, so to speak. But this goes far and wide. And now what we're talking about is that less people are going into OBGYN because they're scared that they're not going to get the proper training. When we use the word abortion, for lay people, it's such a negative term, but we use that word abortion in terms of just a miscarriage, just a not having a pregnancy for whatever reason. If you had a miscarriage, if you had incomplete miscarriage, if you had a full miscarriage. And so that particular procedure is not just for what I call a voluntary interruption of pregnancy, but it's for all abortive procedures. And so when we take it out of context, it becomes something negative, which it's not. How can I treat my patient to the best of my ability? How can I continue to save lives? And how can I continue to have the patient have ownership of her body? So we need to really try to change the narrative, although we have so many things going against us. And DOPS really turn back the hands of time. And it's scary. It's scary being an OBGYN. And it's scary to see where we're going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now if we're not getting enough doctors to become OBGYNs.
I have a question that I just wanted to throw out there. How do the rules apply to birthing centers? We know that a lot of mothers choose to now give birth within their home or birthing centers. And I wanted to know, how do the rules apply in that space around saving a life, around about the rights to, anything as far in the South specifically? I just wanted to know, are there different rules when you are in a birthing center? Is it harder to receive that type of care from a midwife in birthing centers in the South, just given all of the legislation and things around reproductive rights?
That's a good question that I'm thinking on.
I can come back to you. I can ask another question, and I'll ask this question. I know that you're not on the panel, Dara, but you are an OBGYN here, and I am so grateful for your presence. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just ask a follow-up question to you. You're very close to the South. Have you seen an influx of patients coming to DC, the DC, Maryland area? Have you heard that from your colleagues? And if you have, My question is, are they in worse conditions than they would be otherwise?
That's a really good question. It's not necessarily coming from the South, but Maryland itself, we have, I don't know the exact law, but we do terminations up to a higher level gestational age than some states. So we have people coming from, and I'm from Michigan, we have people coming from Michigan, we have people coming all over because we are considered, again, a safer state. Now, the question is, and when we talk about access to care, these patients getting here is the biggest issue. So I wouldn't feel, and if my colleague did a procedure on these patients, he or she wouldn't necessarily feel like they would go to jail. But by the time the patient gets here, it may be at a point where they can't get help. And, I'm particularly on labor and delivery only now. And I just have an example of a patient who waited a really long time to try to come here to get a termination. And I won't say any names and I don't want to be against HIPAA, but what I can tell you is that by the time that she came to us, she had already developed a comorbidity where she couldn't get the procedure done, if that makes any sense. So she was further along and she developed something called preeclampsia. And under law, we cannot do this particular procedure for her because she was already sick. So she comes here thinking that, she would not have a baby and had to go home with the baby because we had to induce her and all the things. What I'm saying is access to care is important. And like Monica said, it's very strategic. It's not by happenstance that these laws and these rules are happening in places where we have low socioeconomic patients, we have marginalized patients, we have patients who may not have the education to get to where they need to go. Because please believe me, if somebody who is of a different economic system, if they need their care, they will find it and they will get there as soon as they can. So it's more than just the actual mechanics of the procedure. And whether you're against abortion or you're for abortion, that's not the conversation we should be having. What should we be having is, can this woman who is of sound mind and body make a decision for herself? That's the conversation we should have.
Thank you so much. And I just want to tell the room, Dara is a friend to She Matters. She is a part of She Matters in many ways. So I just want to shout you out for the work that you do. And thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a quick just observation. And some of you on the call, I know, some of you I don't. So I may not necessarily know what you know. So I don't want to be repeating things or make assumptions. But this reminds me of the Fugitive Slave Act in a lot of ways. The Fugitive Slave Act, I'll just give you a little background. When slaves would flee the South to the North, and they would be free, and I'm using free with air quotes, they could have been free for 4 years. Slave owners had the right to come to the North and grab those slaves and bring them back to slavery, because the law said that if you fled from the South, your owner had a right, because you were their property, to go and get you, right? And so I am not saying that this is slavery, but what I am saying is that the alignment, given the population of women that it affects, is scary. It is scary. And I will follow up with anybody on this call. Marge, we can send a link about the Fugitive Slave Act, but it's actually extremely troubling to see how many of the laws around reproductive rights mirror laws around slavery, as far as the autonomy to one's body. So what we're seeing is history really repeating itself in some ways, affecting those same people, us, And when I say us, I mean brown and Black folks, specifically Black women, if you know, in the United States. So I just wanted to make that observation. Marge, go ahead.
No, I appreciate the connection. You know, that's why it's important for us to be knowledgeable about our history and the history of this country, because things sometimes come full circle, unfortunately. So with that, I want to, I want to take a second, and Monica, you and I spoke about this. It wasn't in the list of questions, but I want to take a second and especially after Dara's comments, talk about and maybe have a few seconds of silence for the two moms. I think it's Candy Miller and Amber Nicole, right? That unfortunately died due to delayed care and delayed treatment. And Monica, I want your take as from a policy and regulatory perspective, as what happened here? What happened? Because this shouldn't have happened. Like these deaths are preventable.
I mean, if I could be frank, the system is working as it was intended to, is what I will say. What happened was, I keep coming back to the words in the article when it broke preventable. That's the word that keeps coming back to me. It's just preventable. It didn't have to end this way, and yet it did. And the sad reality is that these are two stories that we just happen to know about. But I'm sure we all know there are countless others. And I think it's indicative of where we are, as far as we are not as far along as a country as we like to think we are. And so it's all that more important for us to have investments in community advocates and community organizations and grassroots advocates and reproductive justice specifically organizations, because one of the problems with what happened with Georgia's law is, how do I say this in a delicate way? Coming from the South, there is a very unspoken rule of like the South will be the South. And it has been that way for a very long time, where people in the North or Northeast or the West Coast or even sometimes the Midwest typically write off people in the South, despite this is the area of the country with one of the largest population of Black people. We write off the South as the South will be the South. And we have neglected the South as a movement of reproductive health rights and justice specifically. I will say reproductive health and rights, not reproductive justice, has neglected the South for decades. And so unfortunately, these deaths were preventable, but it's not something that I think people who have been steeped in the movement, specifically Black women who have been steeped in the movement, were surprised by it, because they have been saying for years that in the South specifically, a lack of access to all forms of sexual and reproductive health care has been lacking. Access to maternal health has been lacking. Providers, period, have been lacking, right? And so you have had this perfect storm of years of people living in places where they don't have care, they don't have access to insurance, they don't have access to telehealth. And so you couple that with years and years of restrictions and targets on abortion access and sexual and reproductive health care, not just abortion, comprehensive sex education in the South is like a whole nother conversation about whether you can get it. Is really dependent on what your zip code is and what school district you happen to be in. And so you couple all of that with decades of attacks on sexual and reproductive health care, and the perfect storm is created where you have the preventable deaths of Amber Nicole Thurman and Candy Miller. And so I think the lesson I have been taking away is that we can do more. And also at the same time, the hardest pill I've had to swallow is that there is no way to legislate anti-Blackness. There's no way to legislate a healthcare system. I'm sorry, like even for the people that are in the healthcare system, you're still agents of a system built upon racism and anti-Blackness, right? It is what it is. Same with me going to law school. Like, I went to law school, I'm a lawyer, but I'm still an agent of a system steeped in institutional racism and anti-Blackness. Like, it is what it is. And so we can try to do good within the system, but until the system is dismantled, I don't know what that looks like. We're going to continue to have Candy Millers and Amber Thurmans because the system was never designed for Black women. As you just talked about, Jade, with the Fugitive Slave Act and just like the history of this country of Black people not being able to self-determine our own lives, that there's that history of us not having the agency and the autonomy to make decisions about our sexual and reproductive health care. And so that has just continued in different forms. And I think right now we're seeing it manifest in attacks on sexual and reproductive health care. So
thank you so much for that. I just wanted to add my little spiel on the North. So we often have conversations around maternal mortality, specifically Black maternal mortality, like it is something that belongs to the South. But the North, right here in New York, Black women are 9 to 12 times more likely to die in Brooklyn, New York, than white women. And there was recently a woman, Marge, if you could look up her name, because I don't want to say it wrong, an Afro-Latina woman from Honduras who was a mother already. I believe she was 25 years old. And I have been saying this, screaming from the tops of any, soapbox that I'm allowed on. This woman was murdered in a hospital where they've already killed multiple Black women during or after delivery. And the reason why why I'm saying kill is because we have all the information and the implications around the death of these women, and their stories are like forgotten. No one is talking about the fact that right here in New York, in the North, Black women are dying at rates that are above the national average, right? And what does it come down to? I truly believe that it comes down to accountability. It comes down, and Monica, you're right. It does have to do with the system being systemically racist. But I think what happens in the system, if I'm correct, and please, anyone hop on, I'm open, is that we leave racism and all of the immoral and violent things that go along with racism to the South. But that happens right here. We're all a product of it, right? I am what we would call a Jackson White. My family were Northern slaves. So I always like to let people know that, yes, slavery ended in the South, but slavery was also a product of the North. And we can't forget that because racism is alive and well right here in New York. And so I just really wanted to stress that this is a problem in the United States of America. This is a problem. Marge and I just recently, She Matters became finalists in a pitch for a health, like a health grant to be a part of a whole healthcare system. And in Denver, Colorado, right, Marge? Black women are like, 4 or 5 times more likely to die, and they make up such a small percent of the population, right? That's systemic racism. And so what I don't want anyone to walk away from this meeting thinking is that Black women, Indigenous women, oh my God, because Latinas or Latinos, like birthing people, brown and Black birthing people, die all across this nation. It is not just in the South. And I'll get off my soapbox, Marge, and go ahead.
No, I think it was important. And I think as you were talking, the Honduran woman that passed away in Woodhull Hospital last month in September, her name is Bevorlin Garcia Barrios. And I linked the New York Times article about her case. And I think, it's just a lack of accountability all around, unfortunately. So you can read more about her, and I think in the article it mentions I think she's the third woman in just as many years to have died at Woodhull Hospital. So there's some serious problems going on there. And so that's indicative that, up here we don't have it all together at all. So it's a crisis that's spreading across the nation. Mimi, I think you just joined. Thank you. I'm trying to find you on my list. So at this time, I want to shift gears a little bit because I know we've been talking about, the Dobbs decision that was made in the last couple of years, but I also wanted to make sure that we give space for, what has been happening even before that decision was made in terms of the disparities that Black mothers face. When giving birth and during their postpartum period. We are grateful that Mimi Taylor is here with us to share her story and her experience and her ultimate recovery. Mimi, let me find you and pin you, and you have the floor to share your story.
Before Mimi starts, I just want to let the room know that Mimi was so wonderful to me during my pregnancy, during my postpartum period. And her story has always stuck near and dear to my heart because it definitely could have been prevented. She is a godly woman. She is an advocate for Black women. And Mimi, just thank you for being here.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely,
Mimi,
absolutely.
your camera is the wrong way for us.
Okay.
So I don't,
Okay.
how can we? There we go. There we
Okay.
go. Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry about the delay. My phone, these phones is terrible, but anyway. Um, yeah, so my experience was very, very difficult. While I was pregnant, my doctors did inform me that I was carrying a lot of fluid. To the point where she said, I'm gonna need you to carry around a lot of blankets and towels. She said, because when your water breaks, it's going to be a lot. They didn't do, I was always going into premature labor, so I had to get on medication to stop my labor. Even to the point where they had to inject me with steroids at one time because they thought she was coming. So they gave me a date to come to the hospital to deliver her. I was 30, I want to say I was 39 weeks. I go to the hospital. I'm ready to push, give birth. On my husband's videotape it, and on the videotape, you can hear the doctor said, "Where's all the fluid?" When she had to break my water, she said, you could hear her say, "Where's the fluid?" Um, the day after, of course, they keep you in for a night, send you home the next day. They were taking my vitals, and the nurse noticed that my blood pressure was extremely high. The doctors only gave me medicine. The doctor at the time gave me medication just to lower my blood pressure. I went home. I was extremely tired. Didn't know why I was so tired. In my mind, just thinking, I'm just giving birth. That's probably why I'm so tired. But I wasn't feeling well, so I had went to like 2 days after giving birth. I went to the emergency room. He ordered all these tests, blood work, a CT scan, all the things, and they only did the blood work. He didn't do the CT scan, sent me home. Lillian, thank God, God is so good, had jaundice, but not enough to keep her in hospital, just enough to bring her home. I had to put a light on her. There were nurses that would come and take her blood just to make sure her belly ribbons and everything were, going back to the way they should be. So the nurse that came, one morning. This is like the third day after I had her, and she heard me cough, and she said, I used to work with pregnant mothers. Can I take your blood pressure? And I'm like, okay, sure, not a problem. She took my blood pressure. She said, you need to get to the emergency room right now. I went to the emergency room. The doctor there said to me, she said, well, I don't like that you came back in less than 24 hours. We're going to find out what the problem is. Okay, that's fine. I got up to go use the restroom. When I got finished using the restroom, from the sink to the door, it felt like I had ran a marathon. I couldn't catch my breath. I opened the door. Somebody saw me. They said, "Do you need help? What's wrong?" And all I could do was nod my head. Come to find out that my heart was down to, my injunction fraction was a 25. It was supposed to be between 55 and, at my age at the time, 55 and 60. They rushed me to ICU. They start draining the fluid off of me. I'm like, they're coming in there changing fluid like frequently. The fourth day I woke up talking to my husband on the phone and got off the phone with him. And probably like 10 minutes after getting off the phone with him, I literally could feel the air leaving my body. I call him back. I'm breathing heavy. I'm like, I can't breathe. He said, get someone in there now. They come in there and they're trying to give me oxygen. At this point, I can't breathe at all. I'm like, okay, they don't know what's going on with me. So I'm hitting them. I'm pulling off the oxygen mask. Long story short, I woke up 5 days later. And I say all that to say that had she initially not known where the fluid was, checked to see what had happened with the fluid in me, I could have probably not went through that whole scenario. Um, and then my blood pressure being as high as it was, if they would have just checked it, that's another thing. And then the doctor at the emergency room, if he would have did the CT scan and just set up, just pushing it off as, oh, you just had a baby. That's probably why you're not feeling well. Just go home and rest. It was so many things that could have happened. I literally almost lost my life. If not for the nurse being there, I'd have been home with my child by myself, not being able to breathe. Um, so God is good. He was able to put that nurse there at the right time, and get me to the hospital. So I just felt like a lot of things could have been happened. I felt like I was just passed over, like, oh, you'll be okay. You just had a baby. It's okay. You'll be fine. And it was just things leading up to that could have happened better for me. I struggled with my heart it did not go back. And they said when this happens, it's called postpartum cardiomyopathy. And I was diagnosed with that and CHF, chronic heart failure. And my injection fraction didn't go back up for 3 years. They said that was a long time because they said usually when that happens, it's like 6 months. But from what I understand, what they told me, the fluid had went around up above my stomach. So every time I pushed, the fluid was pressing up against my heart and made my heart muscle weak. So I felt like I was failed that day. All those days, I felt like I was just I get so emotional talking about it because I could not be here. Um, and I just felt like, it just made me not even want to have any more children. I was just like, listen, that experience was too much for me, which I couldn't anyway. They told me you cannot, after that experience, you can never have children again. So it was very disheartening for me to hear that. But had I been able to get pregnant again, I probably wouldn't have. It was just, that was a lot. I never experienced anything like that, like from doctor to doctor to doctor. Like you could literally hear my doctor say, where is the fluid? why do you check to see where the fluid was? You know, so what's my experience?
Thank you so much, Mimi. Every time you tell this story, I just feel so angry
Yeah.
and so emotional, right? Because I know Lily, right?
Yeah.
So I always get into a space of imagine all the women who aren't on this platform or who aren't here
Yeah.
because there was no nurse who came in the room. There was no nurse who came by. There was no one that cared. And so we do have Dara's and OBGYN on here, and I'm not a medical doctor. This is my work, but I'm not a medical doctor. But the work that Marge and I do is around creating empathy through change behavior, right? Because had someone cared enough, this is not like medical, like I don't want to say the wrong thing here. So what I want to say is, had someone cared a little bit more, your birthing experience could have been very, very different.
Absolutely.
Very different. And I'm going to ask anyone who is in healthcare on the call, what is that called when the fluid actually disappears, right? Maybe Dara, I've never, before Mimi, I had never heard that before. We talked to, thousands of women. Maybe does that happen? Is that a normal thing? Is it like a part of, is it rare? Can anyone speak to that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get my technology together. This is Dara, and there could be multiple different things. So what happened is that what I believe, because I wasn't there, but was that she was retaining fluid for whatever reason, which is like a vascular issue. So it doesn't necessarily mean the fluid from the baby went to the fluid around her heart. That's two separate things. So the fluid in the baby is, and then when that fluid is low, that's called oligohydramnios. That's baby. But a pregnancy issue, preeclampsia, all of that can cause you to have excessive amount of fluid in your legs, in your ankles. Your belly is bigger than what it should be, and it can go, like she said, around the heart. It can go around the lung. Around the lung, that's called pulmonary edema. So sometimes people can have shortness of breath. Congestive heart failure, CHF, cardiomyopathy, postpartum cardiomyopathy. Is it common? No, but do we see it? Yes. And as you shared, Mimi, there are signs and symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
We may not say that's cardiomyopathy, but what we should say is that she's having some issues postpartum that we need to investigate further. And the work that you all do at She Matters matters. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it does, because you don't have to be clinical to know that it's not okay for Black women to be dismissed, unheard, ignored. So I'm actually getting chills now just talking to you all about this. Hearing Mimi's story, it's so sad that her story is one of thousands that go through this. It's just that Mimi had, like she said, an angel, someone to reach out and say, hey, this is not okay. We are Black women, we don't have anybody really looking out for us, or Black or brown people. So the pulmonary edema, cardiomyopathy, fluid around the heart, congestive heart failure, all of those things can be, we call the word sequelae, or could be issues from a preeclampsia or just a cardiac injury. Those are some other words you will hear. And it could have been, like I said, I don't know. This is, of course, in retrospect, could have been that you had preeclampsia with severe features, and that fluid that you were retaining went up around the heart. And probably some of it went up around the lung too, which is why you had really bad shortness of breath. But the end result is just that you were not heard. You were like, oh, you're in the ER. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. And where is the fluid is an important question. You know, she had a lot of fluid. Well, why don't we see it now? You know, and even if you looked fine and your doctor knew that you were retaining, and again, I don't know the doctor, so I'm not saying that, but in retrospect, it felt like some investigation should have happened a little bit sooner than you going to the ER twice.
Absolutely.
Thank
And I
you.
would say that I did have, prior to me getting pregnant, I did have edema, but nobody ever treated me for it. They were just like, oh, well, you're fine. You do retain water. I never got fluid pills or anything to control it. So I don't know if that could have went to all the fluid as well, but these were things that they knew. And, you trust your doctors, you trust your doctors and what they say, and I had a pregnancy where I was constantly going into labor. I don't know how, I know people have Braxton Hicks, but I was going into labor. I stayed at the hospital, and then finally they put me on bed rest and pills, but it's really disheartening. I worry about my girls having kids at this point, because of this, and just Black women not getting the care that we deserve, because we're deserving of it just as much as anyone else. It does a lot to our bodies, and we should be heard and not overlooked, walk past, whatever.
Mimi, thank you, Dara. Thank you, Mimi. I completely agree with what you said. And one of the reasons why Marge and I started She Matters and I had this idea was because in my daughter's first year of life, I went to the emergency room 21 times.
Jesus.
Nobody ever said, do you think you might be struggling during your postpartum period? I was given volume and sent home. And one nurse came in one time, maybe on the 14th time, and said, do you think you're having like postpartum depression? And I was like, I don't know. And she was like, well, we're going to send you home with volume. And that was it. There was a point where I was having postpartum anxiety, OCD, where I was looping harming my child. I was having urges. I was doing this at night, like from harming her. I never wanted to harm my child. I never felt the urge. I didn't want to, but the loop from the OCD, that it was plaguing me. I remember being so ashamed and going to so many people. And the real reason why we wanted to make sure that She Matters had an educational component to it for healthcare providers was because I went to a therapist, I went to a psychiatrist, and she asked me if she could tape me for her class because she didn't get a lot of Black mothers who were this vulnerable. I never went back to that woman ever again because I am not a circus animal, right? And I just felt like there was a deep disconnect between myself and providers that were not Black or brown. That is my experience. Now, the providers that delivered my kids, I went to one of the best hospitals in the New York metro area. They knew who I was after my first child. I was sent there. And so I got a different kind of treatment because they don't want any smoke with me. Like I'm the CEO of She Matters. But everybody should be treated like that. And before I went to that specific practice, I was at another practice with a Black OBGYN who definitely violated my body on numerous occasions. And I switched at 27 weeks because I felt violated by someone who looked like me. To go back to Monica's play on systemic racism and how everyone has to be educated about the nuances around navigating the healthcare system as a Black woman, as an individual who shows up as a Black woman, regardless of ethnicity, right? And we get into these spaces of what could have happened, what could I have done? And this is what plagues me most of all. Black women blame ourselves so much. Well, if I would have said this, or if I should have said that, or if I could have said this, and the reality behind the entire thing is you should not have to become a doctor, Mimi Taylor, to have a baby, because you did not go to school, you didn't take a Hippocratic oath, you didn't do any of those things. And none of us should have to become nurses or doctors to safely deliver Black children into this space, right? And that is why we're here. That is why we truly felt the need to get on here and have this conversation and fill people in around the implications of what this space and time can look like for our children. Because let me explain something. This isn't about today. Because what's happening, and Monica can attest to this, this is about years to come, right? Because the way things have been set up, even if we look at the past administration's policies and the courts, things have been set up for the future, right? And so we have to go into this and into Election Day fully aware that it's less about us, right? And everyone who's on this call with our multiple degrees and our houses and our bills. It is about those little people, whether you are mothers or fathers or not. It is about the people behind us, right? Because there is no reason why a little Black or brown child shouldn't dream of becoming a mother. For us, it's a nightmare. I always say the first thing, when other cultures, I have friends of many other cultures, that always sounds bad, but that is the reality. And then, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm so excited. A Black woman finds out she's pregnant and goes, ooh, I'm so excited for 1 second. And then it's, oh my God, I hope I don't die having a baby. My pregnancy was plagued with, I had OCD just trying to stay alive. Not to mention what happens when your child is now living in this space, right? It's stress. It's stress all the way across. And so we had this meeting to just give information, tell a real life story, have people's voices who know what they're talking about to cut through the noise, right? And so we are so appreciative of Monica, of Dr. King, of Ms. Taylor, for being here to share their expertise and their experiences so that you run to the polls, right? And for certain purposes, we cannot endorse a particular person. But I will tell you, you should vote the way you want to vote. But I will be voting for Kamala Harris on Tuesday. So my suggestion is that you do what you feel in your heart and keep Black women at the forefront, keep women at the forefront, and reproductive rights at the forefront of how you make your decision on Tuesday. Marge?
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone that contributed to the conversation. I know we're already at 9:02 and we didn't really have a official Q&A, so I'm sorry we ran out of time, but I'm going to send a link to the recording to all those who hopped on. And then also, if anyone on here is interested in learning more about our cultural competence certification program, we are offering the first module for free, and I will pop it in the chat. All you have to do is add your email and you can access it and tell us what you think. But thank you so much for spending the past hour with us this evening. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Shout out to Dara. You came through as usual.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. You have a great evening.
You too.